Oh, the event is now recording. Fantastic. So thank you everyone who is here live. We really appreciate you being here live. We know a lot of people from around the world signed up. So some people will be watching this in the replay. If you're live, we would love for you to ask us questions. If you have a burning issue at work or something you would like us to kind of bring as a part of the conversation, you can use the chat or the Q&A feature. I think we've already seen some people using that, so that's wonderful. And I think we do have the conversation kind of prepared, but we would love your thoughts, input, and questions. And even if it's just to say, I agree, or that's a great point, or that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, whatever you want to write, we love the interaction into the conversation. Everything goes here as long as you're nice. And we will be sending this out after the fact, like I said, to anybody. So if you are watching this in replay, don't worry, you can always find us on all of the social media platforms, and I'm sure you can get your question answered by DMing us or doing a post or something there. We're happy to participate. So first, let me thank my my co-hosts here today for agreeing to be on this. We're going to go through just a quick little bit of business here, and then I'm going to introduce all of them. These are three people who I very often refer to, lean on, and ask questions to as we kind of talk about remote work, hybrid work, flexible work, and I know you're going to get a lot out of their thoughts and expertise today. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I want to thank People G2, which is my organization, for putting on this free webinar. They made this all possible, all of the logistics, the planning, all that stuff. My team back in the background did a fantastic job. So if you're in the United States or Canada and you're interested in background checks, you know where to find us. We're happy to help. The next thing is I did recently write another book called Remote Work, Redesign Processes, Practices, and Strategies to Engage a Remote Workforce. And it has been getting very good reviews, and I'm very excited that it's almost out. The end of May, it will be live. If you want to pick up one copy on wherever you buy your books online, Amazon or whatever, you can do that then. However, if you are interested in buying this in advance copy, if you'd like to maybe grab a few for the office, we are doing a promotion. So if you go to that website there, chrisdyer.com/remote work promo, you can buy 10 or more books at a discount in advance. And the best thing is 50 other companies are giving away free or discounted services for anyone who buys 10 or more books. So there's some really awesome giveaways there. You can get a lot of help from everything from diversity inclusion training to ergonomics to having an event with your team with locals. Flex Jobs is giving away discounted job postings, all kinds of cool stuff. So check that out. And that is enough of the commercial. Let's go ahead and get to the show. First, let me introduce Laurel Ferrer. I always do that. I practice it and then I screw it up. And I'm sure it's not the first time it's happened to you. So everyone always says my name wrong anyway. So welcome to the club. But she is one of the first people that I met. And I'm not going to read her bio there. You can read through it. But I'm just going to kind of say she's one of the first people that I met in the remote workspace. And she's always been so generous with her time, putting out resources to not only to companies who are using remote work, but to people who want to take advantage of remote work. And so you should definitely be following her, listening to her. She is for sure an expert in the remote space and is the CEO and founder of Distribute. So if you need help in that area, she is definitely a resource that you want to check out. The next person that we're going to be bringing in is Lizette Sutherland, also another remote work pioneer. She's out in the Netherlands. She wrote a book, Work Together Anywhere. And if you have ever done a training, if you've ever thought about anything to do with remote work, she has probably either been on there or her stuff has just been stolen and repurposed as someone else's idea because she's been doing it for so long. I'm not sure if any of us, maybe Wayne, have had any other original ideas on our own because they have done it all. So she's a fantastic resource if you are not following her or haven't picked up her book yet. In fact, when you're picking up my book, you should pick up her book, and then you should also pick up Wayne's books. He's got 14 books ranging from remote work to, he also does a lot of other fiction work that are fantastic books. And Wayne and I met in Guatemala, of all places. We went on a little remote retreat, ended up in the middle of nowhere. And when I say the middle of nowhere, I mean the middle of nowhere.
If there was ever a conference that should have been virtual.
It was that one. Well, we did get to sit and watch a volcano erupt and have our flights, delayed. And yeah, I would say it was the most pointless excursion and yet the most wonderful. It's one of those moments where, like, if you knew what was going to happen, you would have said no, but I'm so glad I went. Got to meet Wayne and some other amazing people that I've stayed friends with forever. So definitely Wayne is a fantastic resource. Check out his books as well. But let's go ahead. All of you, thank you. Oh, I guess this is my thing. I'm not going to feel stupid talking about myself, but here is a little bit about me. I have written 2 books. You can check those out. And I do a lot of work around remote work. And I think one of the things that I'm excited about is that for years, I have been asking conferences and companies to talk about remote work. And they usually said, sure, go down to Salon Z. There's 10 people down there you can talk to about remote work. And it really wasn't a focus. And so the silver lining about COVID is now that's all anyone has asked me to talk about in the last year is remote work, hybrid work. And it has become such a center point to the future of work. And I'm really excited to bring in everyone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so we can see everyone. Their faces nice and big. There we go. So welcome, team. Thank you so much for joining this webinar on Expert Talk today.
Thank you for having us. This is going to be fantastic.
So let's start with Lizette. Where are we right now? Where does the I guess the compass sit for this, for remote work? Where do you see things right now?
I'll start with the small questions first, I guess. Well, clearly what we've seen is a lot of the people that doubted whether remote working was possible saw that when necessary, that it was absolutely possible. So we don't even have to have that conversation anymore. It was possible, but it's painful, right? And then we all have to remember, like, this isn't the normal remote work. This is pandemic remote work. So it's like extra painful. And it's mostly painful because of that. The other thing that it seems like what we've learned is remote work's not only possible, but we're also productive. What we're hearing from companies all over the world is 2020 was just as productive, if not more, than previous years. But the thing that's really a problem at the moment is burnout and well-being. And fair enough, we're all living through a pandemic and having to survive in our lockdown in our homes. So yeah, burnout and well-being is totally a concern. But I don't fault it because of remote, although it definitely plays a role. The way that we're working is definitely playing a role. The endless meetings, what Cal Newport calls the hyperactive hive mind kinds of working, all of that is playing a role. But I would attribute it more to the pandemic, and just the total stress and instability of the moment is also playing a big role. So that's sort of where we're at. Like, it's possible, but it's painful. And now I think companies are really trying to decide, like, where are we going to fall on the spectrum of remote possibilities?
Yeah. How about you, Laura? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think overall as a society, we're in a bit of a honeymoon period that at first there was a lot of stress with the change, and now there's a lot of organizations that are embracing this and saying, this is fantastic. Look at, how wonderful and innovative we are and all of the talent that we're going to attract because of this. And they're stepping up as thought leaders saying, dun, 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 like, look at us, which is great. Obviously, those of us that are early advocates have been hungry for this level of support and endorsement for a long time. However, what we don't remember as an organization, or I should more accurately say what those organizations don't know about the change management process, is that the hard part is yet to come. So going remote is a very different conversation than staying remote. And so as these organizations work in non-pandemic conditions, they work on long-term culture development and sustainability, there's going to be a lot more work to do, and that honeymoon period is going to wear off. And so I think for us as a community of thought leaders and advocates and evangelists, we have a challenge ahead of us, and but we are also celebrating the growth that has come in the past year as well.
And how about you, Wayne?
Boy, howdy. Yes, what they said. I think there's 2 things that we need to keep in mind right now. One is that we have crossed a Rubicon. It's been building and building and building to where remote work was going to be a thing, and people have been saying that for 20 years, and suddenly it's a thing, and it took an event, right, to make that happen. I think the second thing that's happened is as we start to think about the return to work and what it's going to look like in 21, 22, 23, the hybrid workplace where it's going to be less about there's in the office working and there's remote working, and it's just going to be working. Kevin Eichenberry and I were talking today. I would be surprised if 2 years from now, Remote Leadership Institute is still called the Remote Leadership Institute, because everything that we're doing is going to be such a core competency for leaders. Every leader, unless you are physically in a, physical work plant, is going to have some teammates, colleagues that don't work where they do, and it's just going to be part of the environment. And it's taken this kind of push. I think about in the last year and a half ago, Zoom was a niche product, mostly free with no corporate penetration. 6 months ago, it became a verb, and a year ago, it became a syndrome. Right? We've gone from what's a Zoom to Zoom fatigue in barely a year. That's amazing. And it's going to take a while for the dust to settle and see what that means going forward.
What I'm seeing is, I think, ditto everything that you all said, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. But unfortunately, a lot of the work that I did prior to COVID was more around culture, right? And my company happened to be remote. But we were talking about engagement and culture because that was the lens everyone could understand. If I showed up and said, well, you have to do it as a remote company first, didn't get quite the same reception. But I always noticed that those companies who were the B+, the A- companies, right? They're just right there. They were the ones who wanted to talk to me. They wanted more training. They wanted to make their cultures better. And I'm noticing the same thing with remote work, that it's those best companies that are saying, wow, this is great. Yes, we can see it works. Yes, we want to make this be a part of our organization. But it's the same crappy companies with the same crappy cultures who are saying, we have to come back. I can't collaborate unless we're in the same room. Or they're playing lip service to this, or they're realizing, I think JP Morgan just recently said they were not going to do this, finally relented and said, we're going to let 25,000 people work remotely because they were going to lose those people, right? The talent, I think the people, and this is often how change happens, right? Is through grassroots. People have to show up and say, this is what I want. This is what is important to me. And you need to make it happen if you want me to vote for you, to work for you, for whatever. That sort of movement has to be important. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see, will we have another fragmentation inside of our companies? So what do you go ahead, Wayne?
Well, I do not have a crystal ball. I am not much of a betting man, but I will say this: 6 months from whenever your office starts to bring people back, there will be a wave of turnover. Yeah. And it will happen for two reasons. One is the people who wanted to work from home and kind of got dragged into working in the office are going to vote with their feet. It's also, I think, that there are a lot of people right now who can't wait to get back because they're desperate for human contact. And in 3, 4, 5 months, they're going to go, oh, I remember why I wanted to work from home.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And operationally, when they go back to the office just because they are lonely and they want to hang out with their team members, that turns the office environment into this drain of productivity. And so all of a sudden their employers are going to start keeping them out of the office, or what should be happening is designating a very, very clear workplace selection guide of when do you come into the office and why, versus when do you stay out of the office and why, so that you are equally as productive in both places. But yeah, if people are just going back because they're lonely, no work's going to get done.
I know a lot of people who spent a majority of their work time on the road, going to different locations, whether that's for clients or because it was operationally at different satellite offices. And they were totally dysfunctional. I mean, they couldn't communicate with their teams. They barely ever had time to work with their direct reports. And now, because of this, they have shifted. Now Zoom has become a part of a thing, or if it's Teams or whatever. And I think, there's a recent McKinsey article that we're going to reference a few times here today that talked about that companies with higher communication are seeing higher well-being, productivity, and making remote work work. So Lizette, you kind of brought this up, right? You talked about the burnout and all of this, and then needing for us to deal with some of this well-being. What maybe communication strategies, or what types of things should companies be putting into action now to deal with some of that?
One of the things that I recommend for all teams is, but especially going back to the office like this, is to create team agreements together for how you're going to work, what the expectations are, what the success look like, what are the results that we're going to deliver, but also just knowing where information is going to be stored, having one source of truth so that people can always dip in and dip out as needed, is going to be a really important thing to have. I've always recommended it, but I think now that it's going to be, like when everybody's remote, it's one thing. When everybody's in person, it's one thing. But hybrid's a whole other ball game. So we've just experienced all remote. That was fun. We've done in person before. Now we're going to do hybrid. It's a totally different ball game, and so a team agreement is like necessary, just so that what's normal behavior for our team. After that, I think there's a significant change that already needs to happen, but I think when going hybrid, it will just make it need to happen more, and that's we're going to really need to change how we work together. We can't, there's a lot of talk of going asynchronous now. That's one of the strategies, right? We want to go asynchronous so that we don't have to have so much synchronous conversation all the time. But what we don't want to do is go asynchronous and replace any sort of conversation we were going to have with 20 emails. And so what we want to do then is really create better workflows so that we don't have to message each other so much, like especially unscheduled sort of messaging communication where, I think the statistics are we check our inbox once every 6 minutes, and our sort of instant message tool, whether it's Slack or Teams, like once every minute. And so that's not a sustainable way of working. And that's one of the things that we've taken in person and moved online. And it's, we're seeing burnout. I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing burnout is because we're constantly tapped into this way of communicating. And I think that long term, we'll need to find another way. Hybrid's just going to force it to happen quicker.
What about you, Laurel?
Yeah, I think what we have to lean on in this context where we don't have any patterns for success, because this is uncharted territory, is we look at the case studies that we do have access to of where hybrid teams went right and wrong in the past. And because of those, we know that hybrid teams are the highest risk model of remote work. It is much, much easier to go 100% remote or 100% on site. And because of this, we know that there's a lot of risk involved in the direction that we're headed. So the more that companies can operate exactly like Lisette was saying, like asynchronously, leverage those workflows, really standardize employee experience and operational flows as much as possible so that everybody is working in the same way. And this is just like Wayne said as well. This isn't about remote work. This is just about working in a better way that happens to enable more location irrelevancy and location independence. Because when we're less dependent on being in the same place at the same time, then we're able to be more flexible. And so it really is going to rely on a lot of discipline and a lot of intentionality from our leadership, from our operational teams, from human resources, from IT, from everybody working together in the organization to say, how is this going to impact each of our departments individually and collectively? And what do we need to do to proactively prepare? How do we need to adjust? How do we need to implement? And how can we all be unified in making sure that employee experience and communication, like you said, is absolutely equal between everybody, regardless of location? Because again, historically, That's what went wrong in companies like IBM and Yahoo that had their infamous policy retractions. They said, nope, hybrid isn't working. Everybody that's working remotely has to come back into the office. That's what was going wrong. It was an imbalance of employee experience. Business was operating as usual on site, leaving some people out of sight, out of mind. And that was over time creating so much imbalance that there was discrimination, there was career stagnancy, and that eventually led to lawsuits. So as much as we can focus on that remote first mentality or virtual first or office optional or whatever, everybody seems to have their own term now, but as much as we can focus on is everything equal for everybody, that's what's going to be the key to success, I think.
Yeah, and I might challenge the word equal. I might say fair, right? Because we can't be equal. Not everyone can have the same experience and the same rules. We have different countries, we have different genders, we have different, there's so many different variables, but can we be fair to our people? Is always, I think, my measurement or my yardstick, for lack of a better word. But I think it's interesting because we can look at these big examples and say, well, what is IBM doing? What is Google doing? But I often want to tell people, you're not Google and you're not IBM, so stop worrying about what they're. You can look at them for inspiration, I guess. But like, if you're a team of 40 people, you can put in some really cool ideas and rules, and you can really mold and create the environment you want, and that's going to work at 40. But if you grow to 500, it's going to change. You're going to have to be different. And if you're all of my people are in the United States, so I'm within 2 or 3 time zones is all I got to worry about. But if I had people around the world, I'd have to totally change our async policies and how we do things. So I will say some of the things that I wish maybe all of you want to think about, and these might be controversial to some of you. Some things that we have played around with that have worked really well for our organization have been, we do not have any communication that happens internally via email. Everything must be in Slack internally. Now, if we're copying a client or a vendor, yeah, then you can go on email and that can go out. But everything goes into Slack, and that could be Teams or whatever. But that allows for more transparency, right? It allows more people to see what's happening and to catch up with communications and for us to do that. But the other one that we implemented, and I'm really a dictator about, is that, well, there's 2 things. One, there should be meeting types that are optional. Not every meeting that you're invited to should you have to show up to. And that allows flexible work. If you have to show up to a meeting that your boss calls, but you're not technically working at that time, you're not really supporting remote work, right? But the last one is to eliminate one-on-one meetings. And this is the one that I usually get people kind of go, wait, what? So let me explain. If I'm in an office, traditional office, let's say we're IBM, and I can see there's glass windows, I can see Gloria walk into Tom's office and have a conversation. That's a signpost to me. I know that I'm supposed to talk to Tom after Gloria does, because they're going to communicate about this issue, and then I'm going to be the next person. I can visually understand when it's the right time for me to show up and now have the next conversation. We don't have that in remote work. If you keep meeting with people one-on-one, you're in a vacuum. You are totally untransparent. No one knows what's happening and who's talked to who. So I suggest that people try to have as many team meetings as they can. Quick, tiny, fast team meetings so that there's communication, there's transparency, and everyone knows what's been talked about, or you put it in Slack so everyone knows what's happened, and then they can build on that as a signpost. When is it time for me now to engage the next person? So Wayne, any thoughts on that, or anything else that Lizette or Laurel said?
I think that I've got about 20 things, and it's the wrong time of day and the wrong beverage to actually drill down into some of what you said. I think one thing is it's really important that we distinguish between one-on-one meetings and conversations.
Okay.
Because the conversations need to happen, and they need to happen one-on-one, because that's how you build relationships and all that. I understand your distinction. It's just we need to be really clear when we say things like no one-on-one meetings, that doesn't mean you don't talk to somebody if you're alone with them. That way lies madness. I think that part of the analogy that I always use, and it's a bad one, but it's a funny visual, is, you were talking about the big companies kind of struggling with this. And none of us were there, not even me, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, and they kind of looked down at the silly, obnoxious little mammals running around their feet and going, ha ha ha, we run the world. And eventually the mammals kind of got the last laugh. Organizations that are able to be nimble and adjust and try things that weren't being tried before is obviously where the innovation and the good ideas are going to come from. I think it's really important not to despair if you work in a big company, though, because the equivalent of that is your team. You can't control what your organization is doing, but you and your teammates can absolutely figure out how to make this work.
I think that there's a big difference too between innovation and publicity. And I think we as consumers need to be much, much more savvy as we are watching what is happening in the world of remote work innovation. There's a whole lot of brands that are very opportunistically marketing how progressive they are and how they're innovating in remote work. And most of it is just smoke and mirrors. So I love what you're saying, Wayne, that we need to watch these big brands, but very, very cautiously.
Was that I wasn't sure if you were waiting to pop in there or not.
I mean, I can always say something, but in this case, I always think like what works for one team isn't necessarily going to work for the other. And the big famous one is, when Spotify had their squad model and, like the agile development world went crazy, like, oh, the squads is the way it's supposed to be. And it turns out like it worked really great for Spotify for a while, and it didn't, but it's not going to work for somebody else's team. So indeed, I think lots of feedback loops with your team, small experiments, figure out what's working, keep doing those. Things that don't work, don't do those. But like really being deliberate about it. I mean, I have a business coach, and every week we have a one small experiment that we do every week. And then we, at the next session, we always review the results of the experiment and decide where to go next. And I have to say, it makes a huge difference, because while it's one small thing a week, 52 weeks later, I've done a lot of things. It's amazing how it adds up. So I'm just like, feedback loops is the key to happiness.
Well, what's really exciting about what you just said, Lisette, is that you have a process for getting that feedback and then making that adjustment. What is going to happen, because human beings are human beings, and we've been this way for a long time, is we're going to set up all these cool rules about how we're going to work together, and we're going to set all these expectations, and then we're just going to start doing and doing and doing and doing. And we are not going to get this right the first time. And if we don't intentionally process check, if we don't intentionally say, how's this working? What's working for you? What's not? What should we be doing differently? And not from the top, but from the team level, all we're going to do is replace one bad process with another one. We're going to get so caught up doing the work and doing the grind that we don't do that process check, that check-in, that how's it going. And that's, I suspect, what's going to happen for a lot of organizations.
I agree. I think, in fact, we know that the legendary Roberta Sawatsky is in our audience today because she made a comment. Hello, Roberta, who conducted fabulous research on this years ago about what are the 8 critical skills of remote workers. And we know that a few of those are exactly what we're talking about, which are critical thinking and accountability and flexibility and communication. That is same exactly as applicable as it is on the individual level as it is on the organizational level. We need to be willing and able to ideate, to develop, to optimize on the organizational level without waiting for instructions from larger brands, because just like we're saying, what's right for them doesn't mean that it's right for us. We need to be able to think critically about, that is great inspiration. How do we want to implement and adapt for our company to make it work for us, for our industry, for our company size, for our region, our local culture, for compliance? How do we want to adapt that for us?
Well, we've seen a huge increase in productivity. I think we started off the beginning of this, talk today talking about that. I mean, there's so much data coming out that, CRM entries went up, calls went up, chat activity went up, emails went up, all that has really gone up in a really significant way. And of course, the next thing that's probably bound to come is going to be burnout. Some people did more work because they had more time, right? They didn't have a commute anymore. They weren't sitting in a car for 2 hours or a train. Some people did it out of fear. Some people did it out of boredom, right? If you were suddenly stuck in your house with just you or you one other person, there's a whole lot else to do but watch Netflix and work. So there was a lot of that going on. What are we going to do here as let's say that people keep some bits of remote or flexible work, hybrid work. Let's assume that we're not going to go back to quote unquote normal, what it was pre-pandemic. But now we suddenly have some more freedoms, right? People are vaccinated. Let's say COVID, the pandemic cools off. How are we going to address burnout? How are we, are we just going to expect people to keep up this level of productivity or they're out? Or how are we going to kind of challenge this? I'll turn to you, Lizette, and give you the first whack at this.
I think actually it would be better for Wayne. I can see him bursting at the seams.
It's funny, this last year, thank you, Lisette, my blood pressure, thanks you. This last year, while I have always been a great advocate of remote work and I've worked remotely, and I kind of get lumped in with that remote work is fabulous and, side of things, I am pragmatic to the precipice of cynicism about a lot of this. And when I hear about, people are more productive, there is a point at which you can only get so much productivity out of human beings. And the expectation about what we're doing and what we are expected to do keeps rising and rising and rising. And, we can have fewer people get more work done. And there's a whole long-term impact of work. What does it mean to work? What does it mean to be productive that we are going to have to re-engage? If you look at engagement scores, a lot of our clients, their second quarter of last year, their engagement scores went through the roof when people started working from home. And they said, why is this? Well, because when there's a crisis, people pull together and they make it work. They're engaged because of a lot of things, not the least of which is they're terrified they're going to lose their job. And a lot of the things that we're measuring sound like good news, and there are some long-term impacts that we are going to have to be mindful of.
Yeah. And I think that we also have to consider the formula of measuring and calculating productivity. It's not just about getting more output and squeezing your people dry for more and more and more volume and results. That formula of calculating productivity is productivity equals output over input. So you need to pay just as much attention to decreasing input as you are increasing output, right? So we need to make sure that we are reducing supervision. And that's what circles back to what we were talking about before. Like Lisette said, stop having so many meetings, but that doesn't mean that you replace all of your meetings with emails either. Let's just work more efficiently in a way that requires less supervision, less input. So we're articulating what workflows are. We're making more repeatable work. We're encouraging autonomy and self-management for more people to make their own decisions, so they're not getting blocked and delayed by waiting for approval from a higher supervisor. We're just reducing and streamlining work better. And that's location irrelevant. That is good, practice, no matter if you're virtual or hybrid or on site. That's just really thinking critically about what does it mean to be productive? Does it mean to be at a certain place at a certain time, or does it mean to be increasing output and decreasing input?
Well, I think there's also a certain amount of learning how to work remotely as an individual if you don't have a lot of experience, or even if you do. I mean, it took me a while to get into to find a system that worked for me and that would be sustainable for me. And of course, that even that changes over time. And so that's just one of the things that I've noticed. There's a lot of burnout happening because we're blending work and life. I mean, without, because we have no choice at the moment to blend work and life.
And we're deprogramming 150 years of social conditioning.
And also, I would say, I'm a big advocate of the blending, but I don't think it's necessarily that healthy all the time. What I'm really learning is when I read Deep Work, what the thing that struck me was when Cal Newport says you want to be on and off. So when you're on, be off, and when you're off, be off. And that was one of the things. But of course, I think the thing that makes it difficult is what works for me isn't going to necessarily work for Laurel or Chris or anybody else. Like if I'm off and if I choose to just be on and off. But Laurel might have a whole different process. So I think it's really difficult to learn what works for ourselves because people have the idea of that it's like in the past that it was all umbrella drinks and pajama bottoms, but it kind of is, but it's a lot harder than that in terms of productivity and finding your own system.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also deprogramming people. I mean, a lot of the reason that people are unable to balance home and work is because we've been conditioned to what work is and how we work and what it means to be an employee. And it's going to take a long time for this to shake out. It's not going to be as easy as instituting a policy.
Yeah, and really defining the different types of people that might be working in your company, because I would say my entire experience with remote work and how I operate it is totally different than most of the rest of my people. So I'm on the road. I'm like Lizette, I'm working wherever, I'm figuring it out, I'm being productive. My biggest challenge is to not feel guilty when I'm not working. I have no problem like picking up my computer at 9 p.m. at night and working for 2 hours because I feel like I'm productive all of a sudden. But then I'll feel guilty if I'm not working at 10 a.m. Right? And so you have to unprogram, as you said, Wayne. But my average employee is a work from home. They have a dedicated spot. They have it, and so for them, it's about not having the commute, being able to have their family to kind of have a different experience. And then my salespeople, a totally different experience, right? Because they're going to see clients and they're traveling. And so we don't create rules or systems that force any one of those groups into something that doesn't make sense, but we try to create different experiences for them. Our sales team will have a different experience from remote work. My research team has a very different experience. In fact, they're the only group that really works asynchronously, right? They really take that to heart. Whereas the sales team, like we got to get on calls, we got to talk it through. We're doing a totally different work, but we don't pigeonhole the team, the company into one strategy, into one way. So
yeah. And I think that's important to do across the board too. I mean, I know that all four of us here have had hundreds of calls and conversations like this over the past year. People just saying, how do I work remotely? Like, give me all of the best practices of remote work. And they just are ready and waiting for you to hand them this tiny little packaged product that's like, da, 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 this is all that you need to know about remote work. And it's not like that. It's the entire premise of and core of the future of work is more empowerment. We're trying to unlock the human element in a systematized business world. So that means that there isn't this cute little package to hand over to you that's going to solve all of your problems. It means that you now have the opportunity to think and to be creative and to make mistakes and have trial and errors and to customize. Like, that is the exciting part. That is the solution, is that you can do whatever you want on an individual level and on a company level. Like, that's why we're excited about it, is not because there is an easy solution, but because there isn't an easy solution. And you get to do now what humans and only humans can do, which is to think and to solve and to create.
Well, I want to remind everyone, if you have a question, please go ahead and throw that into the Q&A. We also love your comments. We've been reading them as we've been going along, but there was a question that came in from Delta. I think I'm going to throw this to Lizette first. It says that we still have a lot of leaders or managers with a "if I can't see you, you're not working" paradigm. Do you see a need for a transformation related to the way performance management needs to be handled to be effective?
Okay, so it's not my area of expertise, but I've always thought that performance management kind of, I mean, this is like annual performance reviews and these kind of things. I thought all of those needed to be redone anyway. I mean, who likes the annual performance review to begin with? Like no manager, no employee. It was a broken system to begin with. So yeah, I think that if that's the kind of thing that we're talking about, then that definitely needs some reform. And that's where the feedback loops come into place, right? You want to do feedback loops of teams. One of the teams that I was working with, or the companies that I was working with, Management 3.0, they had a really lovely, just an interesting 360-degree feedback system called Merit Money. And it didn't involve money at first. We tied money and bonuses into it later. But the idea was that every month, each person on the team got 100 points. And the only rule was you weren't allowed to keep points for yourself. You had to give them out, and you could give them for any reason, but it had to be transparent. So we had like a tool. I can't remember, it was you earned this, or I done. So we had a tool, Bonusly. It was Bonusly, and you could give points to people. And what that did is that every month, everybody got to give feedback to other people on the team, so that you knew what people liked about working with you. And that was one part of the feedback system. The other part is that we all had to like quarterly ask others for feedback. So I think that on performance management, it just needs to be faster feedback loops, I guess, is my main point. Instead of these annual performance reviews that just don't work. You're not getting feedback in time to make a real difference, I feel. So I just think somehow performance evaluation will need to just have faster feedback loops. But for every company, the process is so different.
Well, and if we get back to what Wayne was saying about programming, leaders, they don't know what they don't know. And so if their experience is how they were parented, how they were coached, how they were instructed in school, which is do what I say because I say so, or because I see you, you must be, paying attention or doing whatever. We have to, any leader, any manager that would say this should be a giant red flag for your organization. That leader or that manager does not have the training, does not have the leadership experience to be able to, to do that. If that's how they're going to manage people, is by seeing them, and they're going to judge productivity based on papers rustling and staplers clicking, you have a really, I don't want to say bad leader, but at least someone who doesn't have the right information yet to be able to be a more effective and more accomplished leader. Because remote or not, the top leaders would never say that. They would never be, they would be looking at output, right? Not at activity that I can see with my eyes. And so that's a really big challenge. So you can get feedback loops, as Lizette saying, in a small team setting. You can work on those. But if you are maybe a little bit higher up in the organization and you're wondering, well, how am I going to understand how the organization is doing? Another great practice that you may want to consider doing is eliminating the annual survey and instead ask one question every week. Ask your whole company, ask your team. If your company's too big, break it down into teams. You get, I do one question every week, and I get 95% participation. And because they're only having to answer one question, it takes them 2 minutes to respond. And I get incredible information back, and I can understand, how is my team doing? How are they feeling? Are they have what they need? And I can build on that. And we meet once a month as a whole team, and I can really begin to talk about some of the things I'm hearing, or I can make quick changes. If everyone's saying that they feel really burnt out, then what can we do for burnout? What can we implement right away? And people can see that, right? So incremental changes, that feedback loop, as Lizette was sort of bringing up. So Wayne or Laurel, any other thoughts on that?
Well, the big thing is, there has been a move in leadership for as long as there have been leaders to move away from managing activity versus output, right? And the prime example is, if somebody is a good employee because, by golly, they're there when work starts and they leave at the right time and they're there every day, right? Then obviously they're a good employee. But people who sit in their desk all day and don't get anything accomplished. right?
Right.
And this starts at school. We give prizes for perfect attendance. Well,
Yeah.
that generates certain behaviors, right?
Mm-hmm.
You come to school when you're sick, and it's more important that you come than that you actually learn anything. So, when you're managing behaviors, and I understand why we do it, because we're looking for metrics, right? We're looking for some concrete thing that we can measure, but we need to look, whether you're in the office or not, to measuring output and not just merely activities. And that's something that is a leadership issue. That's not a remote work issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more physically impossible to do when you work remotely. You'll make yourself and your team crazier by trying.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to say that we can also, not also, we still see productivity 100%. I mean, I gained my experience as an operations manager. Like I 100% need to see all of my employees working and productive every single week and every single month. Like that was my entire job, right? So we can still see people working. We're just looking in different places and relying much more on those metrics like we talked about. So really getting those key performance indicators into place to say, I mean, those literally indicate your performance, right? How are you going to prove to me at the end of the week that you made good use of your time? And then we measure those metrics. And Kirk made a really great point in the chat that, yes, there is a difference between being a boss and a leader. So it is important that we're doing both of these hard and soft skills and hard and soft measurements and hard and soft encouragements as management, that we're saying, all right, are you doing your job? And how can I support you in doing that? We see that all the time as we're consulting, is the big mistake of managers. And Wayne, I'm sure that you could talk about this until you're blue in the face, right? But the managers mistaking autonomy for abandonment. And so they're like, well, you've got all of these workflows that are in the handbook, and you've got location independence, you've got everything that you need. See you later. So micromanagement is one side of the extreme, and then this total abandonment is the other side of the extreme. And where we need to be is in the middle, that we're supporting people, we are encouraging them, we're communicating with them, but allowing them to work as independently as possible.
Well, we have lots and lots of questions that have come in from the audience. So I don't think I'm going to get to all of them. I'm going to try to pick out a few that
lightning round. We can do this.
Lightning. So there was a question from Deborah. Hi, Deborah. She owns a staffing company, and she says she recently went 100% remote, let her lease go in March, and now she's wondering about, will this be a differentiator, or will this be could she possibly be an issue, right? She says she has a competitor that's using it as that they're all in the office, right? And they're all remote. So I guess I was sort of thinking that maybe some of the fully remote stigma might be gone now that people realize it's real. But do you think that she needs to think about that, or where do we see maybe some of that 100% remote stigma going here in the next year?
I think you're going to have a lot of benefits on your side, right? Like you can point to great leaders that are going fully remote as well. So you are in good company. You didn't have to I made this decision 15 years ago for a small woman-owned business. It was not cool back then. And yes, it was definitely dangerous to the reputability and credibility of our company. You're not in that boat anymore. So stay focused on the benefits that this is going to bring to your organization. You've got incredible access to a larger talent pool. It's going to be incredible for talent attraction and retention as well. It enables you to be more agile and to operate on a leaner profit margin. So stay focused on those positives and have confidence in your decision.
Yeah, we hid it for many years. It was sort of had the stigma back in 2009. We didn't lie about it, but we didn't offer it up either, right? We sort of hid behind a little bit. But now I will say, right before COVID, we were using it as a clear differentiator. We were saying, listen, we're remote. You're not going to have to wait. Just because I'm technically in California, you're not going to have to wait. If you're in New York, wait for me to wake up and answer your customer service call. I have people on the East Coast. I have them stationed over there. I can handle all of that, right? Where we don't have the location bias, and we can bring on people quickly and effectively, and to your point, Laura, lowered our costs. We could be way more competitive in the marketplace to grow our business. So I think it's always a matter of perception. It's how you twist it, how you go. So maybe I'll bring in another question instead of having everyone go around. Let's see, another one said, my vaccination question is for the hybrid scenario and the desire to be transparent. Oh, maybe I missed another one. Sorry. I'll have to go back and read that
Well,
one.
somebody was asking earlier about, what do you do about vaccinations and getting people together, and is it even legal, and all of those kinds of questions.
Yeah, and that's so obviously none of us are attorneys, not that I know of. Maybe Wayne played one on TV one time, but there's a lot of uncertainty. I think there's some precedent around vaccines before, but will that hold up now is a really interesting question. And what are people going to do when are you going to mandate they have to be vaccinated, right, in order to come back? Or I guess maybe we could even take this out of another question. I recently read an article where people said, it's not that I don't want to go back to work because I love remote so much. I don't want to go back to work because I don't trust my fellow employee, my coworker. I don't trust that they got the vaccine. I don't trust that they're going to wash their hands. I don't trust that they're going to wear their masks appropriately. And so I want to stay safe and stay home. Is anyone else picking up on that sort of sentiment with their clients and what's happening right now?
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. One of the conversations we're having with people is one of the challenges with creating a hybrid model is creating a hybrid model, right? Whereas allowing people to self-select. How often do you want to come into the office? What are your fears? Identifying those things, you may self-identify those who are more comfortable than others. And that may dictate the policy or how quickly, or maybe you're going to come in the first wave because you think you're 6 feet tall and bulletproof. You have health conditions or you have other reasons that you're a little more reluctant. Maybe you're in the second wave instead of the first wave. But it's all going to start with honest conversations. I mean, there are some real challenges. One of the dynamics that I know is going to happen is when we were all together and somebody had a completely different political bent than me, we tolerated each other because we had to, and we had to play nice, and we kind of are good humans, and but now I've had an entire year of living in my bubble, talking only to people who think like I do and act like I do, and that other person has done the same, and that's going to be a whole lot less comfortable conversation in some cases.
Yeah.
And I think the vaccines are going to be the obvious example where this starts, but I think this is going to happen in a lot of situations on teams.
I do worry that we're going to have continued polarization, right? There might be companies saying, we're only going to take you on if you get your vaccine. We're 100% vaccinated. And we're going to have other companies saying, we're only going to take people who won't be vaccinated, right? Who don't want to believe that. And you could continue to have this further, because the workplace was a place where maybe you could have different ideas and different political people coming. And will that be the next place that we continue to just be more polarized and more in a bubble? And I do worry about that a little bit. So we have about 5 minutes left. This has gone by so quickly. You all are amazing. Thank you so much for everyone whose questions that have come in. They have been fantastic. I did have 2 very simple questions, so maybe this will be our little lightning round. And I think Lizette sort of has had the least screen time here in the last few minutes. So I'll start with you again. What are companies getting wrong about remote? What's that one thing you wish that they could just stop doing?
Oh man. I'm really, I guess maybe I'll just do it because I'm immersed right now in this whole idea of the synchronous versus asynchronous conversation. So I think if I might say, the thing that people are getting wrong right now, the one thing companies are getting wrong is that we've taken what we've done in person and we translated it directly online, and we still haven't gotten out of that mode yet. And we haven't all really realized that remote is a new medium of working, and we need to treat it like that. So one of the ways that we do that is shorten all of our online meetings so that we have more physical breaks in between. Then we start to decrease the number of meetings that we're having. Then we start to improve improve the meetings that we're having. So we want to decrease the ones that we need, improve the ones that we're having. And then we need to sort of change how we're working instead of this unscheduled hyperactive hive mind thing that Cal Newport keeps talking about. We need to really put workflows in place. So I think that's not really the one thing that people are getting wrong, but I think that we're still working as if we were in the office together, not recognizing that it's a different medium of work. We have to come at it from a different angle.
Yeah. How about you, Wayne?
I'm shocked that a year and 3 months of forced remote work has not fundamentally changed the way human beings think or work, or that we've got it all figured out in the course of it. I am shocked that we haven't got all the answers. In fact, this is a process. I mean, this has been a huge leap forward. This is the invention of email leap forward. I'm old enough to remember that when that happened and what a change that made. And so this is just the beginning of the change, and that's always awkward and weird and uncomfortable. And we need to know that we're at the beginning of this, not at the end.
Yeah. And how about you, Laura? What are companies getting wrong that you wish they would stop doing?
I think it's understanding the balance between compliance and communication. So often people or organizations are just going to the compliance side and saying, like, here's a policy, sign it, this is our decision, take it or leave it. Or they're only communicating and saying, how do you feel about this? And let's talk about this. And oh, this is so stressful. And they're only focusing on that soft side. It's just like we were talking about earlier, right? The balance between hard and soft. And so what we ideally want to see in our operational processes that distribute is like that balance of, okay, are you communicating about what works best for you? What works best for us? Let's come to this decision together, and let's work together as an employer and an employee to implement the change at the pace that we need it. So it's a matter of like having a policy, and both of you work together to write the policy and mutually sign and agree to the terms and things like that. But it has to be, it can't be employer pitted against employee or vice versa. You've got to work together to have both that compliance side and the communication side in order for it to be sustainable.
And unfortunately, my answer is going to be meetings. I still think that companies are getting meetings wrong. So how you meet matters. In fact, I think your meetings are actually the biggest reflection of your culture. And so if you're having a lot of 1 hour or 2 hour long Zooms, if that's how you meet all the time, yep, you are getting it wrong. So you should be having tiny meetings, right? Like we call them cockroach meetings. They're no more than 15 minutes, but the average one is 7 minutes long. 5 people hop on a call for 7 minutes and talk about one thing really quickly and then get off and they go do their work, right? They can get that so much more done. And again, that's why we don't do one-on-ones, because we'll meet in little tiny groups all the time, constantly. And that way we can move information around quickly. But I hear people saying, oh, I just want to go back to the office. And I go, why? Well, I'm just tired of sitting on the 3 hour long Zoom with my boss. Like I can't get any work done. Like I spend all day on meetings and then I have to work all night to actually get my work done. And so I wish companies would stop having bad meetings. So again, thank you everyone for being here and being a part of this. Really appreciate. I'm going to actually bring back up the slides real quick. And don't forget that you can pick up a copy, pre-order copy of the book by going to this website, chrisdyer.com/remote work promo. There's all kinds of cool giveaways, being a part of that. And thank you to my team here today for showing up. Thank you to People G2 for putting on this webinar. And thank you to Lizette, Laurel, and Wayne. Is there any final words? Anything else that any of you wanted to say before we end this webinar? Look at them.
Make
Thank
more
you for
physical
having us.
weight.
Everybody
All
talk at
at
the same time.
Brilliant.
All right.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everyone, for being here and being a part of this. We will have a recording of this posted. We will send out everyone a copy as well. And if you need us, you know where to find us. We're everywhere on all the socials. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your week.